Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to a very special edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. And today I am joined once again by the one and only, the wrestling guru himself, the Holiday, Christopher Mace. And we are here today to talk about one of wrestling's true legends, the one and only Scott Hall. Holiday, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I wish we were doing videos sometimes under better circumstances. We all know Scott Hall had major surgery with a hip replacement, and he ended up getting a blood clot, gave him 3 heart attacks. He's currently on life support. And his best friend in the world, Kevin Nash, just announced earlier this morning that he was waiting for family to get there to pull him off life support. So, I mean, I've heard a lot of people, I've seen a lot of comments saying he's already passed. As far as I know, and can confirm as of right now, with time of this recording, he has not passed away yet. They're waiting for family to get there, take him off life support. But this is a interesting story, an interesting career, from success to like the rise and the fall and like the rebirth, like a phoenix and the rebirth of one and only Scott Hall. So we're just going to take a little bit of time out of our day to discuss some of our thoughts about him and his career highlights and stuff like that.
Well, Scott Hall, for those of you who know that name, Scott Hall is one of wrestling's biggest icons, and he's been one of the cornerstones of not only the New World Order faction, but of the big boom period of the 1990s. And Scott Hall, you know, he's had a number of different gimmicks, of course, as Scott Hall. He's also been Razor Ramon, and he's participated in some of the greatest and most legendary matches in WWE and WCW history. And Scott Hall made his wrestling professional debut in 1984. So we're just going to have a little talk about his early days, from the NWA to the AWA to his first run in WCW to his most iconic run in the WWF/WWE. So we'll start with you, Holiday. How did you first hear about Scott Hall? How did you first become aware of him?
AWA, when he was one half of the tag team champions with the one and only Kurt Hennig, which became Mr. Perfect in the WWF. I'll never forget that Wrestle Rock promo they did. He was part of that music video, and then he goes, I just remember the line, "I'm Big Scott Hall, I'm Kurt Hennig, and we're ready for the Wrestle House Rumble." And it's like, it was so cheesy and corny.
I think I remember something like that.
At that time, it was the most, oh, that's so awesome, that's so hip, and everything like that, because that's the time we were in back then in the 80s. So listen to that, it was like, okay, I thought it was pretty cool when I was a kid, watching and growing up now, watching back, like, oh, God, this is stupid. What the heck did I like this for?
Did you know, at that time, didn't Hall have that Magnum PI moustache at that time? Yeah, I think I remember that
mustache, and he was a lot bigger than he was when he went into the WWF. Yeah, he was. Yeah. And like I said, a lot of people, and this is I think around the same time before he went there, where he wasn't sure if he was going to get to be a wrestler, because they talked about in his documentaries that he was a bouncer, ended up shooting and killing somebody, and they found it was self-defense and didn't have enough evidence. So, and this was there in that time too, where he was, you know, he thought he was going to be in prison. His life would have been a completely different story had that happened.
Yeah, I think I remember hearing about him being in trouble with police and stuff like that. First time I became aware of Scott Hall, I just got Sky in our old place that we had, and they used to show WWF Superstars, and I saw Scott Hall. He was wrestling as Razor Ramon, and he was facing Rick the Model Martel. I remember that, and I just remember he was a big guy, long black greasy curly hair with a big gold chain, and he used to throw toothpicks at his opponents before he starts the match. And I remember I thought that this guy was he was corny, but in a cool way. He wasn't like silly like some of the other wrestlers of that time. He was silly, but in a good way silly. But when that bell hit, he was a real badass in the ring. And I remember just thinking that this guy is funny, because I always found Scott Hall very funny on the mic, you know, with that deep voice, that "Hey Chico," you know, I always found him really, really amusing. And I think the one moment that stood out for me with Scott Hall as Razor Ramon was his rivalry with Shawn Michaels and those ladder matches they had. And those are like the first ladder matches on pay-per-view, wasn't they?
Yes, on pay-per-view, the first ladder match they ever tried was Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels to see if
Yeah,
it actually would work. And then
yeah.
because they got the match idea from Canadian Stampede Wrestling. And then I remember Bret Hart complaining about he was upset because he wanted to be the first one on pay-per-view and ended up being Scott Hall versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 10.
Yeah, I remember that. That was actually a really good ladder match. The first one, well, the official first one on pay-per-view, which was at WrestleMania 10. I remember that. I remember just I think I rewatched that match. I think like a couple of years ago, and I mean it was 1994, but obviously they weren't as extreme as what we'd get in like the Attitude Era. But for that time, that first ladder match was quite extreme.
That first ladder match was better than the second one because the second one, if you hear the backstory, they couldn't use the ladder as a weapon, couldn't do this with the ladder, couldn't do that with the ladder, couldn't do this, can't after they did with the first one, so they had to get more creative the second go around. So the first one holds up better to me than the second one when they had the rematch. I believe it was SummerSlam. They had the rematch where, like I said, because Razor Ramon won it the first time, then Shawn Michaels won it the second time. That actually elevated Shawn Michaels. Razor was already a made guy at that point with those ladder matches and other matches he's had.
The funny thing is about those two ladder matches is that although Razor Ramon won the first ladder match, more people talked about Shawn Michaels, what he did in the match, because I always thought, because I hadn't seen that first ladder match at the time, I always thought that Shawn Michaels won the first one because they talked about so much what he did. And then when I finally bought the DVD, which was Shawn Michaels from the Vault, which was a compilation of his best matches, and he talks about them, and I watched that match, I thought, oh, Razor actually won that match. I thought it was Shawn Michaels because more people talked about what he did. But it was, as you say, the first ladder match was much better than the second one. I mean, I even watched the second one not too long ago, and I thought, yeah, it's all right. But the first one was much better.
And that's a good example of making somebody look strong even in defeat.
Definitely couldn't agree more. It's something that's severely missing in today's climate. I always looked at Scott Hall as the greatest wrestler to never be world champion. Would you agree with that?
If you want to be technical, and this is something I double checked I knew about from history, he had world championships before, but it's not major. I mean, I wrote it down here, he had a DDT Pro Wrestling, he was their world champion, the USWA that was run by Jerry Jarrett and Jerry King Lawler at the time, they would work together. He was their world champion there, and he was actually world champion in World Wrestling Council, which is the for WWC, which was the ones that the Colognes run. His who see the people like Carlos Colon, and you see Carlito, who was part of WWE. That's his father, and so that he was actually world champion there. But as for any of the other major promotions, no, he never. His closest shot he had a match with Bret Hart for the WWE Championship. His one and only WCW World Title shot he had was at Uncensored '98 Sting versus Scott Hall, because Scott Hall won World War III in '97 that gave him the right to challenge for the title.
Yeah, I remember that. And also, obviously, as we all know, Scott Hall was part of that infamous backstage group, the Clique, with Kevin Nash, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Sean Waltman. And there was another guy as well, wasn't there? Aldo Montoya.
Who we all know is just incredible.
Just incredible, yeah. But it was mainly those five guys.
Which they never really acknowledge him as being a member. And he's talked that several times. And if you look where Just Incredible's helped Scott Hall in the past, and I mean recently, different shows before he was able to get cleaned up. Just Incredible was a big part of Scott Hall's life as well.
Absolutely, definitely. So as we move along Scott Hall's career in WWF throughout the 90s, he had obviously a legendary rivalry with Shawn Michaels, and he also had a rivalry with who would soon become not only his future teammate in the NWO/founding member, Kevin Nash, aka Diesel. And they had a number of matches as well, but they don't really get talked about that much, do they?
That was Diesel's first championship, was against defeating Razor Ramon with Shawn Michaels' interference to win the Intercontinental title.
That was at SummerSlam.
Yeah, no, that SummerSlam was the rematch. He won it on Super.
Okay.
The rematch was at SummerSlam when Razor Ramon got the belt back. And people forget this though too, and it's on YouTube. You find it. You could find a match with Scott Hall when he was part of the Diamond Stud, and I think it was Kevin Nash when he was the Oz character from like the Wizard of Oz, actually teaming together in WCW before they left for the WWF.
Yeah,
that is on YouTube. They actually tagged once together before they became the Outsiders. So I think that's an interesting footnote. It is on YouTube. Just search Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and WCW, put the year 91 or 92 in there, and you'll find it.
So Scott Hall would leave WWF in May 1996 in his final match against Triple H in Madison Square Garden, where all four members did a moment called the curtain call, where they all embraced and broke character. That was quite a very unique and interesting way to leave the company, because at that time, the heels and the faces, you never ever saw them together after the show. No. That was always kept separate. So to actually see those guys together changed the way faces and heels were looked at. So, oh, these guys are not really bad guys and good guys. They're best friends. What was your thoughts on that? Because Hall was a big part of that.
I mean, at that time, I was 13, 14 when that happened, so I didn't quite grasp the concept of the significance of it until I got older. At that time, I was like, oh, that's awesome, man. They're all either turning baby faces, they're all turning heels, or what's going on, or they're all going to be good guys, and I didn't know those terminology either. So I was like, oh, they're all going to be good guys. They're all best friends. They're buddy-buddy. That's all I understood. I mean, that's what I understood. And then later on, it gets more explained, and it's like, oh, okay, now I understand what everybody was mad about and all this other stuff. Because it's like, if you watch something wrestle with Bruce Richter explains, like, going, after that happened, everybody was mad, but what are you going to do? Scott Hall and Kevin Nash are out the door.
Yeah.
Shawn was their champion. And I remember Jim Cornette's funny thing. They should have stripped him to the title or made him lose to the Brooklyn Brawler. But Triple H received the punishment for all that stuff, which was unfortunate, because it wasn't just him involved in it, but it is what it is, like I said, wrestling.
True. I mean, I never really knew about the curtain call till years after, because there was no exposure to internet back then like it is now, so I didn't really know about it. I just would watch it thinking that, oh, those two, Diesel and Razor, they're both gone. I never really thought about, oh, they've left to go work in another company. I just thought, oh, they're gone. They weren't around long. But as we move along, we come to 1996, when Scott Hall became the first guy to appear on WCW TV, which started off perhaps the biggest boom period in wrestling history. Now, I did not see this till years after, because I wasn't really watching much WCW back then, so you can probably touch upon this a bit more. What was your thoughts on Hall showing up on WCW Nitro?
He came out through the crowd and went into the ring. And it was Mike Enos and Colonel Parker still in the ring at the time. There was a match going on, and he goes there, you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here. You wanted a war, you're going to get a war.
Oh, yeah.
He left at that, and he walked out, and people were like, oh, what the heck? And then he came back later on that night talking to Eric Bischoff, and then Sting and Luger in the ring. And Sting comes through, he's like, you're in the jungle, baby. You in WCW, baby. And then Scott Hall threw the toothpick. Sting slapped him. That's how all that started. And he goes, I got a big surprise for you. A big surprise for you. And then next week, we got the debut of Big Daddy Cool Diesel, one and only Kevin Nash there.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty much that promo there with Kevin Nash. So that's the word play. That's the adjective, the word play. I said, we've changed the bar now. This is the measuring stick now. And then that's when everything started going from there, because the whole storyline was They wanted a 6-man tag. Who was going to be the third man? And that was the whole storyline from the Great American Bash till the emphasis Bash at the Beach '96.
When I think of the NWO, now obviously everybody thinks of Hulk Hogan, which is understandable because Hulk Hogan's the biggest star, the biggest name, the biggest legend ever. But for me, I always think of Scott Hall because he, along with Nash, got the ball rolling. They started the NWO. They were the outsiders, the guys who jumped from WWF to WCW, and they laid the foundations down. I mean, no disrespect to Hogan. Obviously, he played a huge part turning heel and turning the whole wrestling world upside down. But really and truly, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash did all of the dirty work. They put the NWO over. Would you say what DX were with Triple H and Shawn Michaels back in '97? Would you say the same thing for Hall and Nash for the NWO? What they did?
Yeah, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash did it. Like I said, they changed the landscape. And Hogan, because you've heard the story. Like I said, we can look back now at 2022, and we've heard everybody's versions of events and what happened. You hear all the backstage stuff. You hear that it was supposed to be Sting was supposed to be the third man, and then Hogan, sure what Hogan was going to do, and then Hogan finally decided to do it, and they were worried he was going to change his mind the last minute, but he didn't. He went through with it. But I mean, it changed the business. Hogan turning heel changed the business with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash leaving at the same time. That perfect storm that happened that then created, and then I hate that they edited it because the original version was, this is the New World Organization of Wrestling. They changed it now. Now they say New World Order. If you watch anything now, it says New World Order from the get-go. The first time it came on, it said New World Organization. Then they changed it to NWO.
I think New World Order sounds a lot better than organization.
I know, but it just for that moment, it's like they changed it next day. I was like, all right, that's a little bit better because I don't New World Organization. Oh God, it's a New World Organization's here.
Yeah, it doesn't quite have the same ring to it as New World Order.
Yeah.
And as we move through Hall's WCW career, I mean, he was a big star, but would you say during the NWO run in WCW, do you think Scott Hall kind of maybe took a bit of a backseat because they were pushing more Hogan and Nash, weren't they, than Hall? What would you say?
In the beginning, they were pushing more Hogan and getting back the world title.
Yeah.
The outsiders were relegated to the tag team ranks, which I was fine with because that's still Harlem Heat's best match in their whole career, in my opinion, is Outsiders versus Harlem Heat, Halloween Havoc '96.
Yeah.
It's still their best match to date with Harlem Heat and Colonel Parker, Sister Sherry, all the interaction between them, and Nash getting the cane and hitting. I think it was, if I'm wrong, folks, I apologize. I think he hit Booker T. No, he hit Booker T, which then broke up the pin, and then he put Scott Hall over him, and then they won the tag title. Yeah. But with the storyline with them, they had interesting storylines when they were tag team champions because, you know, they had, and I could run down this when they were tag champions real quick because their first big feud was the Nasty Boys. They had a triangle match between them, the Nasty Boys, and the Face of Fear. You know, and then that was a good match. And they fought at Starrcade '96. They had against Face of Fear, which that's another underappreciated match they had because Face of Fear, Ming and Barbarian don't get enough credit sometimes because when you're watching two big, strong guys who you hear about in real life that are legitimate badasses that could pretty much kill you probably, and then you're watching this match, you can see the hard-hitting style with all four of them having, because that had to step up Scott Hall and Kevin Nash's game up a lot facing them.
Definitely.
You know, and then you had Sold Out where you had them lose to the Steiner brothers, but then they got the belts back the next day because of Eric Bischoff. Then they lose the belts to the Giant, Lex Luger, Super Brawl, get the belts back the next day. And it's like during that tag run, they lost them a couple times, but they always found a way to get the belts right back the next night.
I seem to recall during Hall's WCW run, I think Hall held the tag team titles with the Giants once, didn't he?
He held it 6 times with Kevin Nash, once with the Giant.
Yeah, I remember. I couldn't remember if it was just one time or more than once, but yeah, I definitely remember he held the tag team titles with the Giants. And one of my favorite angles with Hall during WCW was when the NWO, as we all know, they split into the Wolfpack, red and black, and the Hollywood, black and white. And Hall was in that situation. Which side is he going to go with? Hogan's side or Nash's side? And now, initially, if you remember, he went with Nash to start with. And then later on, he turned on him. That was quite interesting because, you know, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, you know, they came in together, got the NWO started. They were pretty much the glue that held the NWO together. And then to see them actually feuding with each other. I mean, we saw them do that in WWF very briefly, but they weren't storyline wise. They weren't friends. But when WCW, when Hall turned on Nash and they had a little feud for, I think it was like a couple months or something, I thought that was very interesting because by that point, I feel that Hall, although a big name, I don't think he had as much of the star power like Nash and Hogan because, you know, they were pushing those two guys hard. What was your thoughts on the Nash versus Hall feud? Because I thought it was quite interesting because it doesn't really get talked about a lot.
I don't think it was as good as people remember. And I'll tell you why. Because what they did was, people got to remember, this that time Scott Hall was having his demons and his drug issues and his alcohol issues, and they were putting him on TV. Took him off TV for a little bit. He returned at Slamboree. They were still the tag team champions at that time. It was supposed to be the Outsiders versus the Giant and Sting. You had Giant becoming a member of the NWO during that feud before they had the tag match. So he was a member of the NWO, and Sting, who was still WCW at the time, the turn happened, and Scott Hall turned on him, which I was okay with it at first to see what they did. And then, like I said, then you had that, then they lost the tag titles, then they had a feud over the belts and stuff, and it was a weird time because then it was a singles match with Sting and the Giant over the tag titles. Sting won that. He chose Kevin Nash as partner because he ended up joining the NW Wolfpack, and that's how you got the match with Giant and Scott Hall winning the tag titles. They had the feud. There was no blow-off to the feud. You had Halloween Happy Good. Scott Hall get the crap beat out of him 90% of the match. Kevin Nash jackknifed him twice, left him in the ring. Scott Hall wins by countout. The rematch of World War III ended up them beating the crap, the NWO turning on Scott Hall, beating the crap out of him. And then Kevin Nash coming to rescue. They try to go for the Wolfpack thing like they do with the Wolfpack symbol. Kevin Nash walks away from him. That was the end of the feud. There was really no pull-off to that feud. So, to me, yes, I think the match was great up until the finish of it, where you had him just leave and get counted out and give Scott Hall the win. Because at that time, I mean, I can understand from a storyline purpose, he wasn't worried about winning. He was trying to beat some sense into his friend. He did his job and he left. He proved, I can leave you laying. Let's not do this rematch. But the rematch really never happened. So to me, really didn't give the full culmination of that feud. You'd have the teases of, oh yeah, I've seen the way, and that's when you had the emphasis story when Kevin Nash got thrown into the wall, and you got to think off camera, you hear a story about his son was actually there live watching him, and Kevin Nash bleeding. They threw him through the wrong wall, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm fine, just bleeding over here. I'm good, guys." But he got thrown to the wrong wall, and he was mad at the Giant for that. I mean, so this is that time where Scott Hall was just in and out of WCW, having a lot of drug problems, having a lot of issues. And this is not a video where we're going to just make it a puff piece and not talk about this stuff. He had a lot of drug and alcohol issues. He did in this time frame. And but he was able to come back. You know, he won the U.S. title.
Yeah, he did.
But both times he ended up forfeiting it.
Yeah, he never really lost it.
All the stuff. He held the WCW World TV Championship via forfeit. It was at Mayhem. He was supposed to fight Rick Steiner for the belt. It was the title versus title, and then Rick Steiner was injured, so he just, here's the belt, hey, take it. And then he defended them both against Booker T, and then he threw the TV title in the trash, and that's when the whole storyline with Hacksaw Jim Duggan found the title in the trash, made himself the champion, would to go defend it until they did that reboot on April of 2020.
Seems to be the classic WCW writing. Start off something and never really finish it. It was just like more or less just not even just put it in the trash. It's just like forgotten about. It's always the problem with WCW. So as we move along, Scott Hall would return to WWF/WWE in 2002 with Hall and Hogan in the NWO Resurgence. Now, this happened at No Way Out in 2002 when Vince McMahon, in one of probably his best promo, was he's going to inject the poison and he's going to bring in Hall, Nash, and Hogan. This happened at No Way Out. What was your reaction to these guys coming back after all these years?
Well, the thing is, though, too, is like Scott Hall could have come back. People don't realize Scott Hall could have come back at any time. He was fired after Super Bowl 2000 with the match with him and Jeff Jarrett and Sid Vicious for the WCW World Title. And he's told it's because he was seeing a woman that was on the higher executives. He told his personal account of it in the interviews. And so he was fired the day after that event, and he did not come back. They did a storyline where he was supposed to come back, and he never did. And people forget, before he did all that, he made 3 appearances in ECW in non-televised events. He had 3 matches in ECW. There is video clip of him, his entrance in one of the ECW matches one of the ECW matches on YouTube. If you want to check out his entrance at that time, because he was still in the black and white gear when he came out for that. So he, after those events, he didn't wrestle until this point when he went to No Way Out 2002, and he was clean at the time. And it's one of those things where Kevin Nash made a good point. Why are you going to let the Confederate Army beat the Union again? If the Confederate Army beat them for a long time, then the Union finally won. Why are you going to bring the Confederate Army in to the Union's place and then let them beat the Union all the time?
Yeah, it's true.
Analogy, because of the fact that that's pretty much what happened. That you've heard the stories, and this is why you can look at stuff in hindsight being 2020. You can look at stuff as a fan when I'm watching it live, like, oh, this is so cool. Hogan ran over the Rock. This is interesting. What are they going to do? Scott Hall versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. Oh, this is an interesting feud. Oh, what are they going to do with this? And I think that hurt that match because Steve Austin wasn't in a great place either. Scott Hall was in a better place until they changed the finish of his match, where he was supposed to, they said, Kevin Nash talked about it, the original finish was supposed to be Scott Hall beat Steve Austin, and then they changed it, and then it was going to be Steve Austin beats Scott Hall, but they were still going to leave that Hogan loses. No, Scott Hall beats Steve Austin, Rock beats Hogan, but then they leave Rock bloodied up after.
Yeah,
Rock's going to barely beat Hogan, and then they were going to leave him bloody after. They were going to be down at ringside, all that stuff. Then they changed it all, and they said, nope, Steve's going over, Hulk's still going to lose, and then he's going to turn babyface, and then you're both going to get the crap beat out of each other twice. Like, well, Scott Hall don't care then. He's like, fuck it. I'm going to drink then, whatever. And you could tell after that how much, you could tell, like, at first he was very passionate about it, and after WrestleMania, you could just tell that.
He went off the cliff.
Because he had a feud with Bradshaw. And I think his last match was the UK pay-per-view they did, where he beat JBL. Even Bradshaw at the time, he became JBL later, but beat Bradshaw. And then that's when the whole plane ride from hell incident that we just saw on Dark Side of the Ring recently talked about it, and that's when Scott Hall was released from there.
Well, his actual official last match, yeah, you're right, was the his last match was on a Raw in May 2002. It was a 6-man tag. It was Bradshaw, Austin, and Flair versus Hall, X-Pac, and The Big Show. And that was the one moment where Ric Flair turned on Austin when he hit him with the chair and joined the NWO, which I thought was absolutely stupid. And Flair turned heel, and it didn't make any sense to me because, the NWO made Ric Flair's life a living hell in WCW for years. I know you had that little thing for a while where Nash and Flair were kind of on the same page a little bit, because I remember Nash gave Flair the WCW title. I remember that. But other than that, it just never really made sense. And that was that. And Hall was released like the next day, as you say. My reaction was when these guys came in, my initial reaction was, I remember these guys. This is going to be interesting. Obviously, we all know who they were originally, what their runs were, and we know how big they are individually. But I thought NWO in WWF/E, I thought this could work. Initially, I thought this could be really exciting. We could see them fight Austin, Rock, Undertaker, Kane. So basically, we're getting the Monday Night Wars in
Mm-hmm.
2002 all over again. And it was just awful. It was just absolutely awful. Hogan turned face. He went to SmackDown. Kevin Nash got injured one too many times, so he was put on the shelf. And Big Show turned heel again. X Pac, nobody gave a crap about X Pac. He just basically had Scott Hall.
NWO, but then that ended up starting the storyline.
Yeah.
Once they NWO, the one thing coming out of this Vince McMahon coming down and breaking up the NWO was the fact that it started one of the great rivalries in that first match in over 4.5 years with Shawn Michaels. Story because we all know Shawn Michaels had a match in 2000. We've already heard that story numerous times.
Street
But
fight.
for WWE, his first match back over 4.5 years, that night started that whole feud with him and Triple H.
Yeah. It would have been nice to, if not for Hall's Demons, it would have been nice to have seen the NWO with Shawn Michaels and him together. I think that would have been really cool. So Scott Hall would get released in May 2002, and we wouldn't see him again until TNA. Now, his TNA run, in my opinion, I would say his TNA run was quite a bit of a low point. I mean, he done some not bad stuff, but when you put it up against his original WWF/WWE run and his WCW run, his TNA run was the least memorable. Would you say?
Yes, his first run there, he was there for the first few of the TNA/NWA
Yeah.
weekly shows. He was there for a few weeks. He come back in 04 with the Kings of Wrestling, which was Jeff Jarrett and Kevin Nash.
Yeah.
They did that, and he left again. He came back, I think it was 07. He was supposed to team up in a 6-man with him, Samoa Joe and Kevin Nash. That we all know that infamous promo by Samoa Joe when Scott Hall no-showed the event, and that famous promo that everybody talks about, Joe going off the cuff. And then you hear the backstories of Kevin Nash going, whose idea was that, you or Russo? He said, mine. Smack, and smacked the shit out of him twice and made him apologize to everybody the next day. We've heard that story. We only heard it from one side. We never heard it from Samoa Joe's side. He's never talked about it. So I think when you don't talk about it, either you're not trying to bring attention to it, or you know it's true and you're not going to argue about it. So, I mean, he had his final run. He wasn't in the best shape. He came back and regime was there when Hogan just came to TNA, and they were trying to recreate the Monday Night Wars with TNA and WWE. They ended up winning the tag titles because people forgot that Kevin Nash still had the Feast or Fire briefcase for the tag title shot, and he pinned Matt Morgan, Kevin Nash did, to win the tag titles with Scott Hall. So that was 2 organizations they were tag team champions in, WCW and TNA together. That was interesting. They had a couple good matches. I think they had a good match with Inc. at the next pay-per-view. I can say that was probably one of their better matches they had. They had a few with the Dudley Boys, who were Team 3D at the time. And I think that was one of their better stories they had, was them and Team 3D. And originally it was supposed to be Nash and Six in the match against the Team 3D, but Six, aka Sean Waltman, got injured. So it was Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. So you had Outsider versus Team 3D in a steel cage match, which turned out to be really good. And you've heard Bubba Ray's story about it, like going, yeah, he came up to me and said, it's going to be great to kick out of your finish, because Scott Hall, under all this stuff, is still the Ripper. He's still going to pull your leg. He's still like the instigate shit. And that pissed Bubba Ray off, a.k.a. Bully Ray, pissed him off, because he's like, I'll make you not kick out of my finish, buddy. You better not. But then you hear they did a storyline, Scott Hall back in the hospital, and then that was the end of his TNA run. And then Nash left a little while afterwards. He went back to WWE and worked with them, and that's when Scott Hall really just took a dark path. And you hear about that stuff, and and you see him at events where you saw just Incredible wheeling him, and all he was worried about is, where's my money? And then years later, you got DDP, who's trying to help these guys like Jake Snake Roberts and Scott Hall. And it was just like night and day. It took a lot of hard work, but Scott Hall, like a phoenix, he rose from the ashes of all this dark shit he was going on with, and so did Jake Snake Roberts. And DDP saved their lives. I don't, everybody gives credit for stuff and give him criticism for stuff. DDP ended up saving both their lives.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And this was around the time all this stuff was going on after Hall's running TNA. He would make a brief return to World Wrestling Council in 2007, where he went back to his Razor Ramon gimmick for a little while. And he was only there for like a couple months. And then after that, he was in Juggalo Championship Wrestling. And as you say, he went back to TNA very briefly in 2010, where they were trying to do the Monday Night Wars revival. And he just completely went off the cliff after that. But yeah, DDP definitely deserves more credit because he saved both those guys their life. He saved both of them. Really. I don't think, if not for DDP, I don't think Jake the Snake and Scott Hall would be here today if not for DDP.
Yeah, and that's which that allows Scott Hall, who went in the Hall of Fame twice, was Razor Ramon, and then I wrote it down so I knew I was going to forget it, how it was worded. It said, "Hard work pays off, dreams come true, bad times don't last, but bad guys do."
Yeah, that was a good Hall of Fame speech.
Not part of it, so I was like, and he went in as Razor Ramon. He didn't go in as Scott Hall. He went in as Razor Ramon, and then he went in 2020 with the NWO with Scott Hall. At Scott Hall, he went in that with Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Sean Waltman.
Yeah.
But that was just recent. And he looked like he was in incredible health then. He looked a lot better. I mean, we saw him make appearances in WWE here and there. We saw him at WrestleMania 31 in that Sting versus Triple H. That was a good matchup to me. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's horrible." Well, it wasn't horrible from storytelling wise. The whole principle, it wasn't supposed to be about WCW versus WWE. That's what they ended up making it happen to be. And like I said, everybody's like, NWO makes no sense being out there because they feuded with Sting so long. Yeah, but who else were you going to get? Because a lot of the other guys were not in the best shape to come out there. Those three guys were still in the better shape than anybody.
No.
Scott Hall still looked good at that time. And
he did. He really did.
We're not even talking about how creative Scott Hall was. That's why I was thinking about Sting and Hogan for a minute, because it was Scott Hall's idea to get that Crow character and turn that Crow character. And he gets credit for it. And Eric Bischoff, everybody met, it was Scott Hall's idea. He created that. That was his. He was very creative when he wanted to be. I mean, he helped create that Razor Ramon character, talking about, bringing out, have you ever seen the movie Scarface and all this stuff? He took a lot of creative liberty creating these characters. We haven't really touched on the fact how creative Scott Hall is, his mind for the business. And despite all the negative stuff you hear, his triumphs, his failures, everything like that, he rose from the ashes. He's got his son in wrestling, Cody Hall. Maybe his son will be in WWE one day. I'm not sure about that. Maybe he will. Maybe he'll end up in AEW, stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot of organizations now that he could go work in that are been very successful. And so his legacy can continue with his son, his legacy. I mean, I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, he's not going to be as big as father." Who was? There's a lot of people who were not as big as their father. Mr. Perfect's son, he wasn't as successful. Curtis Axel, there you go. Curtis Axel, and that was the ringy name he was using. Curtis Axel, he wasn't as successful as his father. There's a lot of wrestlers' sons who are not as successful as their father. They're not going to be.
No,
they have to make their own career. So I hate when people say that, well, the son's never going to be as successful. No, I don't. Maybe not. Maybe
you can't really say that. I mean, it could be if given the time and the effort and the push, he could be. But at the end of the day, the father and the son have their own separate careers, their own separate legacies. Obviously, they'll be compared to each other because father and son. But at the end of the day, that's their own career, really. Scott Hall has had a career that very few could ever even dream of having. So whether or not his son will be in WWE one day, it's very hard to say, really. But the possibility's there. I wouldn't outrule it. You never know.
Yeah, and with Scott Hall, like I said, we talked about at the beginning of this video that he is on life support right now. They're waiting. Kevin Nash announced they are waiting for family to come out and so they can pull the plug on him. So more highly unlikely it's going to be we're going to be talking about more. He passes away soon. And if you look at his career, you look at a guy who came up in the wrestling business, had his highest moments, his lowest moments, up and down. But at the end, he made himself into be a better person. At the end of the day, it's a true testament to me of how somebody could go so high and so low on the verge of death to come back and rise like a phoenix and improve their life and have a lot of happiness in the last few years of their life. And I think that it just proves a good point that anybody, no matter what, good or bad, if you've done good things in your life, bad things in your life, you can always try to fix them. You can always rise from the ashes and improve on your life. And I think that's a statement I can take out of it. If you watch Scott Hall's career, at the end of the day, you could take that as he was loved by a lot of people. Kevin Nash is going to be his best friend forever. You can obviously clear in his statement how heartbroken he is. And you can see he had changed the last few years of his life. And it is still sad. It's going to happen. Like I said, time of this recording, he had not passed away yet. So we decided we were going to take a little bit of time and talk about our thoughts and opinions about him. So I just got a quick question for you before we wrap it up. What are some of your favorite moments of Scott Hall's career?
Well, funny enough, you was reading my mind. I was actually going to ask you the same thing as well. So I'll go first, and then you can share yours after. Um, I've got quite a few. One of my favorite moments, if not my all-time favorite moments, when he showed up in WCW as the outsider and he brought Nash in. That was probably my favorite moment of his WCW run. Um, WWE moment. I mean, it wasn't really that many, but if I had to pick one of his WWF/WWE run, it would definitely be WrestleMania 10 against Shawn Michaels in the first ladder match. That was when I think of Scott Hall. Those are the two moments I think of. What about you? What's your favorite moments of Hall's career?
AWA when he was tagging with Kurt Hennig. See here, WE, I would have to say, the latter match with Shawn Michaels, both of them. I would go with his feud with the Diesel. He had the one only matchup he had with the Undertaker. I remember that really well. He only had one match with the Undertaker. He had that interesting feud with Goldust. That's one of those feuds I would say is very interesting and taboo for his time. Now looking back at now, that would be normal for everybody nowadays in 2022. But back then, it was so taboo and interesting of a feud that it was really interesting feud. So that's something I can always remember with him. His WCW run, obviously, the Harlem Heat versus the Outsiders match. I think that run of matches they had between that point till we got to Super Brawl 97 was we were having really great matches defending the tag titles as the Outsiders. Him winning the U.S. title was one of those I thought was interesting. Because I thought they were good. I liked his uncensored match with him and Sting. I thought he had a chance to become WCW World Champion. This during that time, I didn't quite understand he was having personal demons because it's like I said, at this point, I'm like 15, 16 at this point, watching it, just enjoying wrestling for what it is. So that I think when the Outsiders won the tag titles for the final time, defeating Bret Hart and Goldberg, I like that moment. WWE when he came back, I think when they first came back, and the I think it was the match between Austin and The Rock versus the NWO. I like that match. but he
Yeah.
really didn't do much back to come back there. And if you look at his TNA run, I like the interaction with him and Toby Keith and their interaction that time. I did like that. I did find an interesting footnote in history that him winning the tag titles with Kevin Nash at TNA, holding different. That was their second set of tag titles they held. Thought that was interesting. One thing I wish they would have done is hold the WWF or WWE tag title in that organization as the Outsiders.
That would have been awesome. I would have loved to have seen that. Yeah, that would have been something. At least just once, even if they lost it just a couple of weeks later, or even the following week later, just to have had Hall and Nash win the tag team titles in a WWF/E ring would have been something. Yeah, I would have loved that.
His Hall of Fame inductions, I think, because everybody would have said he wouldn't have never got those, and he got two of them. So I think they were well deserved for his WWF/WWE career in his first run, and then with what he did with the NWO. He was well deserved of those Hall of Fame inductions. And like I said, I mean, this isn't a pup piece. I've talked about all the negative stuff. He's done a lot of bull crap. I'm not saying the man's perfect by no means, and it's newsworthy, and it's also in history what he's done. But at the same time, he's still a human being. He's a true example of how people can change and become better people. And because like I said, it's time of recording, like I keep telling everybody, he hasn't passed at the time of recording, but in my heart, I feel like it's inevitable.
Yeah,
And fortunately, you can go back in history and they talk about everybody had a Deadpool, and everybody who doesn't understand, if you ever watch the movie Deadpool, they always in that movie that shows where all these guys are betting who's going to die for the other one, and it's really sad that he was in a lot of those people's Deadpool. And guess what? He outlasted everybody almost in that Deadpool, because if you look at some of the list of who they had on there, everybody else passed away before Scott Hall.
absolutely. So he was living proof that you can change and make your life better,
Yeah.
especially with when you got good friends and family and people who care about you. Anything is possible. Anything can happen if you really want it to. Well, that's going to be it from us. We are going to wrap this up now. We wish all the best to Scott Hall. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Kevin Nash and all the guys in the clique and his family. If there is any Scott Hall moments that you have or anything that stood out to you, leave your thoughts and comments down below. And once again, I'm Will Hawk Beyond 2040, and this is the Holiday Christopher Mace. And thanks for listening to us take this nice little trip down memory lane, talking about the long and legendary career of Scott Hall. And we will see all of you next time. Holiday, thanks for being here today. It's great talking to you about this true wrestling legend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Glad we were able to do it today, and hope everybody takes care, stay safe, and best advice for everybody: don't take anything for granted. Live life to your fullest and live it one day at a time, because you're never guaranteed the next day. So appreciate everything you have, because for better or worse, you could always have it so much better, but you always could have it so much worse. So just appreciate every moment of your life every day.
Absolutely. Bye for now, everyone.